Husband beat his 9-month pregnant wife until she collapsed on the floor. But what happened next left him in handcuffs. Hello, welcome back. Please do well to subscribe and tell us where you're watching from in the comment section. Vivien once lived a simple but fulfilling life in the busy heart of the city. She woke up every day at 6 in the morning, washed her face, tied her hair and walked to her small shop, which she proudly named Vivien's Beautiful Things. The shop wasn't big, but it was warm and colourful, filled with dresses, shoes and stylish handbags women loved to browse through. She greeted every customer with a genuine smile, arranging the clothes carefully and keeping everything neat. In the evenings, she counted her earnings and felt satisfied with the life she was building for herself. She was 31, independent and content. But it seemed the world did not think that was enough. Everywhere she turned, people reminded her of one thing: she was not married. At church each Sunday, her mother would sigh deeply and say, "Vivien, when will you bring home a husband? All your friends already have families. Look at Ada, 3 children already, and you? Still alone." Neighbors made comments louder than necessary. Mrs. Chem from next door would watch Vivien leaving for work and shake her head, whispering, "What a waste of beauty. She will grow old and no man will want her." In the market, women pointed and murmured as she walked past, 31 and unmarried. Time is running out for her. At first, Vivien ignored the comments. She believed that life was not a race, but after hearing the same words every day, from relatives, neighbors, friends, even strangers, her confidence weakened. Soon she began to dread stepping outside. Whenever she attended celebrations or gatherings, she felt as though everyone's eyes were following her, saying without words, "There she is, the woman who has no husband." At weddings, people would ask, "Vivien, when will it be your turn?" She would force a smile and answer, "Soon, very soon." But deep inside, she felt a heavy sadness she could not escape. One Saturday, her cousin Mary had a grand wedding. Vivien wore her best handmade yellow dress. She looked lovely, but while others danced and laughed, she sat alone, feeling invisible, until a tall, well-dressed man approached. He had kind eyes, perfect posture, and a confident smile. "Do you look lonely?" he said gently. "May I sit with you?" His name was Daniel. He complimented her beauty, told jokes that made her laugh, and said things no man had said to her in years. When he held her during a slow dance and whispered, "I have been waiting for someone like you," her heart fluttered. From that night, Vivien felt seen, cherished. Daniel called the next day just like he promised. They spoke for hours. He said he owned a business selling car parts and had spent years traveling for work. He told her he admired her strength, her independence, her kindness. Soon they began dating. Daniel visited her shop often, taking her to restaurants, telling her she was the woman he wanted to spend his life with. When Vivien introduced him to her mother nearly cried with joy. "Don't lose this one," she told her. "You are not getting younger." Vivien's family and neighbors finally stopped talking negatively. They congratulated her. They praised her. They celebrated her. And Vivien felt relief, like she had finally crossed the finish line everyone expected her to reach. But there were small warning signs. Once a customer tried to bargain a price in her shop, and Daniel shouted at the woman aggressively, humiliating her until she left. Vivien apologized, but Daniel snapped, "I was protecting you. Don't you want a man who protects you?" Another time he claimed he lost his job because his boss was jealous. He needed money, just a little at first. Vivien gave him some, thinking it was temporary. But soon small money became daily money. Transport money, phone credit, clothes, food. Weeks passed, and instead of improving, Daniel simply asked for more. Still, when he knelt down in her shop and proposed, without a ring, Vivien said yes. She was tired of being alone, tired of being judged, tired of being the topic of everyone's pity. She wanted to be a wife. She wanted a family. She wanted to belong. The wedding planning was fast. Vivien's mother thanked God. Relatives danced. Neighbors finally spoke kindly. But Daniel became controlling. He didn't want her inviting male friends. He criticized her wedding dress, saying it was too tight and would attract men's eyes. He insisted she change it to something looser. Vivien complied, brushing away a small voice inside telling her something was wrong. On their wedding day, Vivien stood beside Daniel, smiling for photos and hugging well-wishers, but her chest felt tight. Still, she told herself, Every marriage has discomfort. Love requires sacrifice. That night, lying beside her new husband, she whispered, "My lonely days are over." But loneliness still found her. Just in a different form. Daniel stopped pretending after the wedding. He complained that Vivien's shop kept her away from home too much. A married woman should not be roaming outside every day, he said. While she worked to support them both, Daniel slept late, watched TV, and continued asking for money, claiming he was still searching for work. Vivien grew tired, her savings slowly disappearing, yet she stayed gentle, patient, hopeful he would change. Then the shouting began. The insults, the accusations, the phone checking, the jealousy, the rules. Soon Vivien was not allowed to go anywhere without telling him. Then she was not allowed to go alone. Then she was told to stop smiling at customers. Then Daniel began sitting in her shop, scaring customers away with his dark stares. Business declined until eventually there was nothing left. But Vivien stayed. Because she believed marriage was something a woman must endure. Then she became pregnant. And instead of joy, Daniel met the news with suspicion. "Are you sure the child is mine?" he asked. From that moment he grew even colder. And slowly, Vivien's world began to collapse. The first slap came when Vivien was 4 months pregnant. It happened so quickly that she barely had time to understand what had taken place. Daniel had been drinking with his friends, sitting in the living room while Vivien struggled to keep food down in the kitchen. The smell of oil and spices made her nauseous. Her back hurt and her feet were swollen from standing. When she finally gathered the strength to ask Daniel's friends to leave so she could rest, they laughed and joked about a wife giving orders. Their laughter seemed to embarrass Daniel, and embarrassment quickly turned into anger. When they left, Daniel's face twisted into something Vivien had never seen before. A dark, cold anger lived in his eyes. He shouted that she had humiliated him, that she had made him look weak, that she should have endured like a respectful wife. And then his hand flew. One strong strike. Her cheek burned hot and sharp. She fell to the floor. The pain wasn't even the worst part, it was the shock, the disbelief, the realization that her husband, the man who claimed to love her, could hurt her. For a long time she sat on the floor, holding her belly, whispering apologies to her unborn child. She didn't cry then. She couldn't. It was as though the tears were trapped behind a wall of disbelief. When Daniel returned to the room later, he acted as though nothing had happened. He walked past her, humming lightly as though slapping his pregnant wife was something small and forgettable. Vivien stayed silent, heart beating painfully. She didn't know what to say. She didn't even know how to feel. The next morning, Daniel brought gifts, food, a new dress, flowers, and he apologized. His voice was soft and sweet, just like the Daniel she first met. He said he was stressed, he was unemployed, he felt pressure to be a good husband. He swore it would never happen again. Vivien wanted so badly to believe him that she nodded and accepted his apology. She told herself that marriage was not always easy, that maybe all couples went through hard moments. She convinced herself it was just one mistake, but it wasn't. The slaps turned into pushes, the pushes turned into kicks, and the words cut deeper than any bruise. He told her she was lucky he married her, that no other man would want her, that she was old, unattractive, and useless. He told her she was worthless without him. And over time, Vivien began to believe it. Her body grew tired. Pregnancy should have been a joyful time, buying baby clothes, preparing a crib, dreaming of a new life. Instead, Vivien spent her days worrying about money, fear, and survival. Her shop had died under Daniel's control. She had no savings left. Some days, she didn't even have enough food for herself, let alone the growing child inside her. Daniel didn't care. He continued leaving the house with excuses, coming home late, sometimes not coming home at all. When Vivien questioned him softly, he accused her of nagging, of being ungrateful, of being a burden. The loneliness she felt before marriage, when people pitied her, felt gentle compared to the loneliness of sleeping beside a man who hurt her. It was a loneliness that pressed on her chest at night, making it hard to breathe. When the time came for her to give birth, she went into labor suddenly in the middle of the night. She cried out in pain, begging Daniel to hurry. He moved as if he had all the time in the world. No urgency, no concern. They went to the hospital, but when they arrived, Daniel announced he had something important to do and left her alone. No hand to hold. No comforting voice, just nurses and fluorescent lights and the sound of her own pain echoing in her ears. But then Grace was born. Grace was tiny, soft, perfect. When Vivien saw her daughter's small fingers curl around her own, she felt a love she had never known before, a love strong enough to overcome anything. She whispered to the baby, "I will protect you. I promise. I will not let anyone hurt you." When she returned home with Grace in her arms, she expected at least a smile from Daniel, but he barely looked at the child. He complained about the crying. He complained about the cost of milk. He complained about the baby keeping him awake. He didn't help, not once. Instead, he blamed Vivien for everything. He pushed her again. He shouted. He disappeared for days. He began coming back smelling of perfume that was not hers. Vivien had no money to eat, so she began selling things from the house, her jewelry, the radio, even clothes. Anything to keep her baby fed. Her body grew thin. Her eyes lost their sparkle. Her voice grew soft and fragile, like it might break if she spoke too loudly. Vivien was disappearing. One afternoon, carrying baby Grace and a small bag of groceries bought from selling her last necklace, Vivien almost collapsed in the street. The world tilted. Her knees buckled. But she held Grace tightly, protecting her with the last of her strength. Just as she started falling, someone called her name. It was Rachel, her friend from university. Rachel caught her before she hit the ground. She held her, supported her, looked into her face and saw everything Vivien had tried to hide. Rachel saw the bruises, the weight loss, the exhaustion, the fear. Vivien tried to pretend, tried to smile, tried to lie, but Rachel knew. She bought Vivien food. She bought milk for Grace. She sat across from her and gently, patiently asked questions. And Vivien finally let the truth spill out, like water bursting from a dam that had been cracking slowly for a long time. Rachel listened. She didn't judge. She didn't blame. She didn't ask, "Why didn't you leave?" She just held her friend's shaking hands and said, "You deserve better. Grace deserves better, and I will help you." For the first time in months, Vivien felt something warm begin to return inside her chest. Hope, but hope alone was not enough. Rachel told her they needed proof, evidence. Something undeniable. Something that would make the police listen. Something that would protect her. She handed Vivien a small phone to hide. "A secret weapon. If he hurts you again, record him," Rachel said. "You are not alone anymore." And Vivien promised. For 3 days, Vivien carried that phone like a shield. She prayed she would never need to use it. But deep inside, she knew she would, because Daniel was not finished and the storm was coming. The storm arrived sooner than Vivien expected. It was a quiet evening when it happened. Grace was asleep in her small crib, wrapped in a soft blanket Vivien had sewn from old fabric. The house was dim and silent, and for a moment Vivien allowed herself to breathe, slow, careful breaths, hoping the peace would last. She was sitting near the window, gently rocking herself, watching the streetlights outside flicker softly in the dark. But the silence broke the moment the front door slammed open. Daniel stumbled in, smelling of alcohol and cigarette smoke. His eyes were bloodshot, his clothes wrinkled, and his expression already carrying the heavy weight of anger. Vivien could tell instantly. Something had happened. Something outside of her control. Something he would try to use as a reason to hurt her. He didn't greet her. He didn't look around. He simply walked past her, grabbed a bottle from the table and threw it against the wall. The glass shattered. The sound echoed. Grace stirred in her sleep. Vivien froze. She knew that sound. The warning, the beginning. Her heart beat fast, but Rachel's words echoed in her mind. "You are not alone anymore. Protect yourself. Protect Grace." The small phone Rachel had given her was hidden inside the waistband of her wrapper, just under her blouse. Her fingers slowly reached for it, careful, invisible, like a secret movement of survival. She pressed the button. The recording began. The tiny sound of the click was lost under Daniel's shouting. He began accusing her of things that made no sense. He claimed she was talking to other men. He claimed she had embarrassed him in front of someone he met earlier. He claimed she was not grateful. Every word was sharp and heavy, and Vivien tried to speak softly, calmly, hoping to stop what was coming. "Daniel, please. Grace is sleeping." Those were the words that triggered him. He turned, rage blinding him. His hand rose. This time Vivien was ready. She stepped back, shielding her baby's crib with her body, her arms wide, trembling but unmoving. "Don't touch her," she whispered. That whisper broke something in him. Maybe pride, maybe ego, maybe madness. He struck her, but Vivien didn't fall this time. She stayed standing even as her cheek burned, even as tears gathered in her eyes. She stayed standing for her daughter. Daniel grabbed her shoulder, shaking her, yelling into her face. The phone recorded everything, the insults, the threats, the violence, every hateful word. Then Grace began crying. That sound, small, frightened, innocent, cut the room like a blade. Vivien pushed Daniel away with a strength she didn't know she possessed. She ran to Grace, lifting her from the crib, holding her tight against her chest. Daniel yelled more, but he didn't follow. He was too drunk. His rage lost direction. He walked to the bedroom and collapsed on the bed, still cursing, still spitting venom, until finally silence returned. Vivien did not sleep that night. She sat on the floor holding Grace, rocking her, whispering soothing prayers, tears sliding silently down her face. Morning came slowly, and Vivien knew what she had to do. She wrapped Grace securely on her back, tied a scarf around her swollen cheek, and walked out of the house with the phone hidden in her pocket. She did not take clothes. She did not take money. She did not look back. She went straight to Rachel. Rachel didn't speak when she opened the door. She simply pulled Vivien inside and held her. And Vivien cried. For the first time, the kind of crying that breaks something open inside and releases what has been buried for too long. Rachel listened to the recording. Her jaw clenched at every word. She knew this was enough. Enough to make the police act. Enough to make the court listen. Enough to break the silence. The next hours moved like a blur. They went to the hospital first. The nurses documented every bruise. The doctor spoke softly, gently, telling Vivien she had endured enough and she was brave for coming forward. Then they went to the police station. Vivien expected to be ignored. She expected judgment. She expected disappointment. But when the officer heard the recording, his face hardened. His voice changed. He stood up. Within hours, police arrived at the small house, her house, where Daniel still slept. He tried to talk his way out. He shouted that Vivien was lying. He said she was emotional. He said she was trying to ruin his life. But the recordings did not lie. They placed handcuffs on him. He twisted and fought, shouting threats at Vivien, at Rachel, at everyone. "You will pay for this. You think you can leave me? I will come back. I will find you." But the officers pushed him into their vehicle. When the car drove away, the street fell quiet. Vivien stood outside, holding Grace close to her heart. Her body was weak, her eyes swollen, her soul tired. But for the first time in a very long time, she felt safe, not healed, not whole, not free from pain, but safe. Rachel helped her file for protection, a restraining order, legal separation, support services for victims of domestic abuse. There were forms, questions, long conversations. It took time, but Vivien stayed strong because her daughter needed her. Grace was her reason. Rachel also helped her apply for a place in a women's shelter, temporary housing where nobody could find her. A quiet room, clean sheets, meals every day, people who understood, women who had lived through similar pain, women who helped each other heal. There Vivien slowly began to rebuild. She learned to breathe again, to trust again, to exist without fear. Some days she cried. Some nights she stared at the ceiling, listening to her own heartbeat, surprised it was still there. But every morning Grace smiled up at her, pure, innocent, untouched by the ugliness of the world. And Vivien knew she had made the right choice. She began volunteering at the shelter, helping other women, listening to their stories, holding their hands the way Rachel held hers. And slowly her voice returned. Her strength returned, her identity returned. Vivien was no longer the woman the world pitied, no longer the woman who stayed silent, no longer the woman who believed she was worthless. She was a survivor, and she was rising. Time passed, and the pieces of Vivien's life slowly began to come back together, but not as they once were. This time everything she built grew from strength instead of desperation. She took small steps at first. She started helping the women at the shelter sort donations, clean rooms, organize supplies, and take care of the children. Grace grew. learning to walk among women who laughed gently and clapped when she took steps. Vivien watched her daughter grow in an environment filled with warmth instead of fear. That alone felt like a second chance at life. But even in this new chapter, healing was not a straight line. Some days the memories came back as sharply as if they were happening all over again. The sound of shattering glass, the sting of words meant to break her spirit, the loneliness of crying quietly at night so no one would hear. Sometimes she would wake up suddenly, heart pounding, terrified that Daniel was in the room. But every time she opened her eyes, she saw Grace sleeping peacefully beside her. And each morning she reminded herself, "We are safe now." Rachel visited often, bringing baby clothes, food, laughter, and news from outside. She helped Vivien reconnect with old customers from her shop, women who remembered her kindness, her careful way of selecting clothes that made every woman feel beautiful. These women were happy to see her safe again. Some even began giving her small orders: sewing work, garment adjustments, and eventually special dress requests. Vivien borrowed a sewing machine from the shelter. At night, when Grace was asleep, she sat by a small window and sewed. Stitch by stitch, fabric by fabric, she earned her own money again. Not much at first, but enough to buy milk. Enough to buy a few new clothes for Grace. Enough to remind herself that she was capable. That she could still create beauty. One afternoon, the shelter director approached her. She had been watching Vivien for some time, admiring the gentle way she comforted others, the patience she showed, the insight she had when listening to stories of pain. The director said, "You have survived something many do not, and now you are helping others survive too. Would you like to train to become a counselor here?" "Officially?" Vivien was stunned. She had never imagined something like that. She nodded, tears filling her eyes. And so she began training. She studied. She learned how to talk to women who were still drowning in fear, how to guide them through the law, how to build exit plans, how to protect themselves. She learned how to be the help she once needed. Her days became full. Grace spent time laughing with other children, learning to walk on steady legs instead of trembling ground. Vivien worked, studied, counseled, sewed, grew, and slowly Joy stopped being a stranger and became something she recognized again. Years passed. Grace grew taller, brighter, and full of curiosity. She would sit near the sewing machine, watching her mother's hands move with skill and grace. "Mama, you make beautiful things," she would say. And every time Vivien would smile. One sunny morning, Vivien decided to reopen her business. Not the exact shop she used to have, but something different. Something new. Something with meaning. She rented a small space, just big enough for a sewing table, a display rack, and a sign. And on that sign, she chose a name carefully: Grace and Beautiful Things, named after the child who saved her, named after the journey that reshaped her. People came, not only for dresses, but for conversation, for warmth, for advice. Her shop became a haven, where women felt seen, heard, valued. Some came as survivors, some came as mothers, some came simply as women wanting something lovely to wear. All left feeling stronger than when they entered. Word spread fast, and before long her shop was thriving. Her name, once whispered with pity, was now spoken with admiration. Vivien became known as a woman of strength, a woman who rose from pain, a woman who helped others rise. Sometimes she would think of Daniel, not with love or longing or anger, but with distance, like a shadow from a past life she no longer belonged to. She never once regretted walking away, because leaving had not only saved her, it had saved Grace from growing up believing that love was supposed to hurt. One day, as she was closing the shop for the evening, she saw Rachel standing outside, smiling proudly. They hugged, long and full of silent memory. Rachel looked at the shop sign, then at Grace, now older and full of light, and said, "You did it, Vivien." Vivien shook her head softly. "We did it." Their friendship had become a sisterhood, unbreakable. As the sun set, casting warm orange light across the shop windows, Grace reached for her mother's hand. Vivien looked at her daughter, the reason she stood back up, and felt her heart swell. She didn't have the life people pressured her to chase. She had something better: peace, self-worth, love that didn't require pain, a future she chose herself. Vivien finally understood something she wished she had known long ago. A woman is not made complete by marriage. A woman is not valuable because a man chooses her. A woman is not defined by whether she is a wife, She is complete because she exists. She is valuable because she breathes. She is defined by her strength, her choices, her heart. Vivien smiled softly and whispered to Grace, "Though the words were meant for every woman who would ever walk into her shop, you are already enough." And from that day forward, she lived not to please others, not to meet expectations, but to honor herself, and to raise her daughter to never settle for less than she deserved. The story of her pain did not end her. It rebuilt her, and she rose.